Welcome, Facebook Live. We are back week 5 here in San Marcos, Texas. So if you hear a little rumbling in the background, we are in a hotel and it may be the AC, but I'm not willing to turn it off.
Yeah, no, he does not. That's one thing he does not negotiate on is his AC when he's in a hotel room.
But today we're going to be talking about parenting. But before we do that, in the comments this week, if you would tell us how old your kids are and how old you and your spouse are. We're just trying to figure out the demographic of who we're talking to, and also it blesses us. It's awesome to read the comments, the questions. Megan put a post out there today about, do you have any questions for parenting? And we actually had some people comment, so at the end of this, we will definitely be answering those.
Yep.
But first off, little room cleaning.
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping, room clean. We're in a room tonight, so it's room cleaning. Get your calendars out. I'll give you a second. Everybody, grab your calendars.
We have something super exciting to share with you guys.
April 8th, we will be announcing for the first time the big news.
Yep.
So tune in next week.
Next week, you are not going to want to miss. You're going to want to make sure that you share and you invite all of your friends to be a part of it, because we have something exciting that we're sharing just with our Facebook Live audience before it goes out for anyone else, because you guys have been so faithful to cheer us on, to watch, to share with your friends, to invite people, and just to dive into all the things that we've been sharing. We want to honor that and share something incredibly exciting with you guys next week.
Well, tonight, get your pens out. We're going to be talking about parenting, as we said. Leverage your influence, listen to your kids, and time with your kids. So that's the 3 things that we're going to hit tonight. Megan, kick us off.
Well, I want to start by just, for some of you who are brand new, my name is Megan, this is Chad. We've been married almost 24 years. We have 2 kids who are adults and do not live in our house anymore. Chandler is 23 and married and expecting our first grandbaby. We get our greatest promotion ever. And then our son Riley is 20. So while we haven't parented littles in quite a long time, we have been a part of every age and stage leading up to where we are now. So we're just sharing a little bit from our experiences, from our wins, and from those parenting regrets, because we all have them. Those moments, we can't go back and change them, but we can learn from them and we can share those with other people.
So leveraging your influence, for me, this is using your time wisely with your kids. We have just a short amount of time each and every day. So what are we doing with that time? Our kids, when they're small, we go to work, maybe our wife's at home, maybe they're going to work and maybe daycare, and then they go to school, and then the next thing you know, they're in high school and they kind of want to be a part of your life, but they don't. So managing your time with your kids is so important, to make sure that you're taking specific times out of the days, out of the weeks, and spending that and putting it on your calendar. Like we said last week, dating your wives, this is just as important as figuring out when the best time to spend with your kids is.
Yep, and leveraging our influence also requires us walking boldly and confidently in our calling, which God placed those children in your home because He trusts you. And we have the position to be their greatest influencer. So they are watching what we do, how we speak, how we respond, how we treat other people, and we are shaping their lives by how we leverage the influence that we have. So we have to be mindful and purposeful in everything that we do, and even when we mess up, because we do mess up and we do miss it, but by leveraging our influence, it means I care enough about what my kids are seeing that I'm willing to learn what it looks like to walk in humility and being teachable, even from our own kids.
And being the example, last week we talked about are you being the example that's worth following? And it goes right into parenting with your kids. Are you being worth the example inside your home, whether that's not missing work, maybe that's staying late for the big project, or maybe that's getting up early to that sacrifice to provide for your family? Are you being the example? We actually called our daughter right before this and just said, what's one thing that we could share on Facebook Live tonight? And she said, just being a good example, being a good role model in work ethic.
Yep. So just because we love being vulnerable and transparent with you guys, we also asked her, how we missed it as parents. And she is incredibly graceful, but at the same time, she's incredibly honest. She got that from her dad. And she said, one thing that we probably took too seriously in leveraging our influences, we tried to control a lot of things. those helicopter parents who try to be all up in everybody's business. And while we do have a responsibility as parents to know what's going on in our kids' worlds, sometimes we can take it to an extreme where we feel like we have to control every situation. And one of the coolest things that God spoke to me as my kids were in those preteen and teenage years is, who am I to stand in the way of their story? And that doesn't mean that, you know, we let all the rules and boundaries go. It just means like we give space for grace in the whole realm of, you know, we are their greatest influencer, but we are also their greatest cheerleader, but also their greatest example of grace and what that looks like. So.
And one other thing is setting expectations inside the family. Sometimes that is missed, and we hold our kids and we get mad at our kids or upset at our kids because in our mind we think that they should know something, or we've set rules out in our mind that we haven't clearly defined inside of our families. And our kids are like, I feel like it keeps changing. So one thing, after we had missed it, we sat down and said, hey, here's our expectations, here's our rules, here's what we expect. And from this day forward, let's erase the past. And from this day forward, this is what we expect. Yep. And it really helped us to parent, and it helped our kids to listen. They didn't always like it, and it wasn't always easy. But then they began to accept what our expectations were inside of our household.
Yeah, because if we don't set those expectations, if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. So if they don't know what is expected or what they're working towards or working for, then they don't know when they win. All they feel like is they're constantly failing. So definitely want to be mindful and know as parents how important our influence is with our kids.
The second one is listening to your kids. I stunk at this. I was not good at this. Looking back now, learning, talking with my kids at family times now, you know, they bring that up, is that I wasn't a good listener. You know, I was the boss at work and I was the boss at home. And if I could change one thing going back, is I would have sat and I would have listened to what my kids were saying, to give them a voice inside of our house.
Well, and one of the things that Chad brought up as we were talking and praying and preparing for this is that our kids are contributing members of our family. Starting when they're very young, all the way until they leave our homes, we get to listen and believe in and accept them for who they are. And the best thing we can do is listen. I learned so much about my kids by listening to what they wanted to tell me about, not answering the questions that I wanted them to answer. I also learned a lot by listening to the way that they talk to and about their friends. One of the things, I think we've shared this before, but with our kids, I did high-lows at the end of their day, and it could be anything that made them happy and anything that wasn't so awesome. But hearing them talk about a friend who made fun of another friend as being their low for the day, I could see part of their hearts, and I could hear like they care about how people are interacting with other people. And my sweet boy, Riley, when he was little, he would say the best part of his day was when I got there to pick him up. What he was really saying is that he couldn't wait to be away from school, but I got to see his sweet nature in that moment too. But we get to listen to them, to know them, and to know their greatest needs, their greatest fears, their greatest victories, and their greatest strengths.
You know, and I would say inside your family, let your kids win. Being a bad listener, and as I got older and as I parented teenagers, I think you had no other choice but to listen to them. But even when they're young, let them win. I still remember when we were playing board games with the kids. When I would win, I would stand up and be obnoxious and King of Candyland or whatever we were playing that night. My kids loved it. And then when we'd let them win, they would celebrate the same way. But let your kids win inside your house. You have rules and expectations that you're not willing to cross or go backwards on. But sometimes let your kids win, even as they start thinking for themselves, as they start getting into middle school and as they become teenagers. Let their voice matter. So when I say let them win, let them, stuff that's really not going to affect the end picture, let them win. Just give in sometimes.
And I also think we have to be open to discussion and disagreements. And this, you know, when they're younger, we try to shut those down as quick as possible because we don't want to create that argumentative spirit in them. But then at the same time, it's that whole pick your battles philosophy. But what I think we wish we'd have been better at in the whole listening to our kids was giving them permission to have their own opinions. And while That doesn't mean they're going to get their way, and that doesn't mean that we're going to compromise on the boundaries or the things that we set in place. Being heard sets them up in communication, because if we're constantly shutting them down and not giving them an opportunity to share their opinions, they're going to quit having them. And that's the worst thing, and that shuts down that part of them that is so important to, especially when they're growing up in a social media world where they're not really having a lot of real conversations. We get to be those real conversations, and by taking opportunities to let them share and let them challenge the things that are going on, it gives you more opportunities to leverage your influence, but then as well just to listen to their hearts and get to know what makes them tick and what's important to them.
And let their ideas count. We said sometimes that we don't allow them to cross the boundaries, but let their ideas count. Let them dream with you. When you allow them to let their ideas matter, it allows them to dream. And like she said, it allows them to be important and feel important.
Yep.
So when y'all are making decisions inside the house on, as silly as it is, where to eat, where to go on vacation, sometimes it's maybe not where you want to go on vacation, but let them win in that. And so
Yes.
they're like, my parents care about me. And they feel big. They start maturing, I think, quicker when their stuff matters.
Yep. And the last one is just to create family rhythms. It's something that we started early on. I would say one of our favorite family rhythms, and when I asked Chandler even what one of her happiest things that she takes away, is just family dinners. We set a precedence early on that even if it was just meat and macaroni, we were gonna sit down and eat dinner together. And while I'm not the gourmet chef that I would love to be, I could make a mean browned hamburger meat and throw some Velveeta shells and cheese together, and Riley would eat it on a taco tortilla, and everybody was happy.
Still his favorite today.
Still his favorite, but it was just that time that we set aside, and it was just one of those family rhythms. Family vacations were another one of those family rhythms that we put in place. Spending time just talking about our days is a regular practice that still happens in our lives when we're around our kids or when we're around other people to this day. But whatever it is, those things that are important to you or those things that you want your kids to take away, make time for them and just start creating a rhythm. And you can start a rhythm at any point, whether they're toddlers or teenagers. It doesn't matter. You can start now. It's not too late.
You know, the love languages with kids, I think any kid, I would love to be challenged on this, but any kid is time. And that just means love. And our kids, whether there's days that they hate you or they say they don't like you or they just really don't want to be around you, the overall, it means love when you're around them. And, you know, take your kids with you. One thing I would say we did right is we took our kids with us. Our kids were disciplined, but we took them with us, whether it was to restaurants or functions or to work. And I think it helped mature our kids into who they are today because they went at such a young age.
I think one of my favorite things is that Chad started taking Riley and Chandler to the deer lease when they were preschoolers and toddlers, and it gave them opportunities to be around other adults and to learn what that looked like and that felt like. They weren't too young for what Daddy did. They got to start coming along and being a part of what he was doing, and I think that was a huge factor in them feeling validated and feeling important and not feeling like the little people pushed to the side. But I think too, love is spelt time, but we also love through discipline. One of the things that we get to do, and starting when they're toddlers, is creating those borders and boundaries in their lives. You know, you create a rule, a border, a boundary, whatever you want to call it, that they can't put their finger in a light socket, because you know full well that if they stick a fork in the light socket, no matter what, it's going to end up badly. And the same thing happens. There are so many things that our kids could run into in life, especially with the dangers of social media and things that are happening, that we see happening through some of those avenues. We have to put borders and boundaries in place. But when we've leveraged our influence, when we're listening to them and allowing them to have an opinion, then when we need to enforce something, it is done in love, and it is not a set of rules that is not backed up by the truth of that they are loved, and that this is because you love them more than anything else.
And date your kids. You know what I love about this? If you start practicing dating your kids, dating your spouse, it just becomes natural. But the one-on-one times with your kids is getting away, whether you have 10 kids or 2 kids. Take just the dad take them on a date, just special one-on-one. The mom do the same, because to them they are special, and that means love.
They are. And I think, one of the biggest challenges, we talked last week about dating. If you haven't seen it, I challenge you to go back to it. But one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that we're balancing this relationship, those relationships, and then even your relationships with immediate family outside your home. And it takes a lot. And what I want to tell you is that every moment that you are intentional, that you pursue those relationships, and that you connect through conversations, it matters.
Amen.
Because we're sitting here on the other side of it, and while we know full well we didn't do it perfect, and our kids will tell you too, we actually want to have our kids on for a Q&A in a couple weeks anyways, just so you can meet them and they can share some things. But while we know we didn't do it perfect, we also get to reap the victories, that we did things well, that we loved the best that we knew how, and we learned every step of the process. So as long as we're humble and teachable in that, it's a huge part, and I believe it definitely overflows and spills over onto our kids.
And as we were praying for tonight, one thing that God just kept pressing on my heart, we do a lot of pre-marriage counseling with young folks, and sometimes older, but we always, when we first meet with them, we want to kind of see the dynamic of the families. Why it's not to find out who came from the good family and who came from the bad family. It's really just so that as we minister to them and as we grow them and as we encourage them, we kind of know what we're dealing with. And one thing that we always ask that I think is so important is, how did your family handle conflict? And we've heard it from my family never fought. I never saw my parents fight. And then all the way to they screamed and yelled all the time. So one thing in that we encourage you is, let them see how you agree and disagree and how you work through those problems, because as kids, one day they will be married, and it's so important that they see how you resolve conflict and how you do it inside your own family, so that they know. We met with this one little girl one time, and she was like, my parents never fought, and 3 months into marriage, they got in their first big fight, and she's like, what's wrong with me? She didn't want to call her parents because she's like, they never fought. Well, that's not the truth. We all fight. Yep. No matter how good or how bad our marriage is, we fight. So let your kids in on that, just to be vulnerable with them so that they know how to live life after you.
Yep. So actually, Chad and I are going to ask each other a question, and then we're going to answer some of you guys' questions. I've seen a couple come across in the Facebook live feed. So if you have any questions for us in regards to parenting, no matter what age or stage, go ahead and leave those questions right now. And if we don't get to them during our live video, we'll definitely go back and answer those on the feed. But so Chad, what would you say is your biggest win as a dad, whichever age or stage you feel like?
I would say my biggest win is the relationship that we have with our kids now. My wife always said, it's something special when they choose to be with you, when they choose to hang out with you, when they choose to come over to the house. Right now, we've always made it a big priority to pray in the mornings, but to pray anytime that we have anything that we're going to go against that day, whether it be a big meeting, a small meeting, a test, whatever it was, we made it a priority to text them or call them before that test, so they know that, hey, we're thinking about them, hey, we love them, and hey, we care about them. Well, to this day, as my son goes to appointments, he'll call and say, hey, Dad, I'm going to meet with such and such, and we prayed. We probably did it 3 times today together, and that just blesses my heart knowing that, hey, that's one thing we did right. And when my daughter sends text to me that, Dad, you encourage me, inspire me, that just really knows that we did it right, and it blesses us.
So I would say one of my greatest wins, I feel like, as a parent, is that I feel like we've done a good job, and I have personally tried to do a good job to really encourage the creative side of my daughter. She's got this entrepreneurial spirit, and she's had this creativeness in her since she was very young. And I remember we were so excited to buy her Christmas present when I think she was about to turn 3, and all she wanted for Christmas was an easel. And we got that easel, and it didn't stop from that point forward. I mean, there were always paints or woodwork or you name it, but just nurturing that creative side, which now we get to see the fruit of that, and the fact that she has launched and maintained an incredible business for a 22, 23-year-old. It's been so fun to see that creative nature. And she doesn't stop. She's always trying to come up with new and creative ideas for things that she can do. And I feel like that has definitely been a win.
So where do you think that we missed it with our kids?
Oh, so I would definitely say that feeling like I had to take responsibility and control every situation and circumstance was detrimental to my relationship as they got older. When they were younger, I think it was good because while we did have two very strong children, we also had two very strong parents. So we were able to work and maneuver that well in those seasons. But as they got older, and it's kind of what nurtured this listen to your kids part, because I think as parents we wanted so bad to make sure that we kept them safe, that we weren't strengthening and making them strong. So that, I would say that was definitely one of my biggest. If I could go back and do it again, I would have listened more and talked a whole lot less and prayed a whole lot more. What about you?
Well, I would say when things didn't go exactly the way that I had thought it out or had the direction for my kids, when it was out of my control and it was now in God's control, I still tried to take control. And when I do that, I would probably come down as pretty harsh or directive or maybe even mean towards my kids. When it was completely out of my control, I still tried to take control. And I look back now saying if I would have just been obedient and had faith in it, then it would have probably been a lot smoother for my kids and my actions towards them.
Yep. So I saw a couple questions come across. Don't forget, it's not too late. One of the ones that came in through a private message is, what is something you did with your kids that you hope they do with their kids? And so being on the brink of the greatest promotion in life, which is being a boss and a darling, in September, I would say, I've always said it, I actually got to preach it from a platform, is that never forget that we're parenting our grandkids' parents. So when you think about it from that perspective, like when we would have these moments with our kids, we're like, oh, I don't want them to do that with their kids. So how could I do that differently next time so that I can reshape this little piece? And I would say one of the big things that we did is we laugh a lot as a family, and we laugh at each other, we laugh with each other. That's just an environment of fun and laughter that has been a huge part. And I would also say our Christmas traditions. Hands down, I love Christmas morning with our family, and I cannot wait for them to share some of those traditions with their families. But I think too, in the practical day-to-day, it's sharing what's going on in your world, sharing the good, sharing the hard, sharing all of that, and however you choose to do that, but it's getting them talking so that you can know them.
And I think for the toddlers, it's just so important is to be intentional when they're young, so that it's instilled in them kind of what you expect when they're young. So as they grow up, they know that Dad's going to be intentional in this, and you know, one thing, guys, you can't be lazy. You can't be a lazy parent, because then all of a sudden you'll be like I was when I was like, it's out of my control, and what do I do now? Yep. And so you're grasping for something to change them or to bring them back. So be intentional with your kids. Spend time with your kids.
I also saw somebody ask the question, at what age did we start letting them have an opinion or share, asking them, where do you want to go to dinner? What do you want to do? And I would say as early as possible. I remember distinctly, I think Chad was on a hunting trip. I'm not sure if Riley was even born. I don't think Riley was even born yet, because Chandler was little. And I asked her where she wanted to go to dinner, and she picked Chili's. And it was because she had gone to Chili's like the week before with a friend before they went to Casa Manana. But I remember sitting in that little 2-person booth at Chili's with my daughter, who is a preschooler, and thinking and just having conversation back and forth over the table and being like, this is going to be so much fun. This is going to be the rest of our lives. Because it was the first time I had sat with my preschooler and had that one-on-one conversation over a dinner, like date time. I mean, we had done lots of things together, but that was a moment when I was like, yes, this is what we have to look forward to. But I think as early as possible. And one of the things that I love is they get to have an opinion. That doesn't mean they get to make the decision. So as long as you establish that, so we can avoid those temper tantrums, I think you're in good shape.
So teaching, coaching, loving, do that with your kids. just remember when you're at your wit's end and you're like, I'm not even sure I can do this, from the crying baby to the crying teenager, whatever age and stage that you're in with your family, remember the next generation is what you're doing this for.
Yep, and we always want to parent with the end in mind. You're not parenting for the toddler who's throwing temper tantrums. You're parenting for the child who's going to leave your home. And I do say it, that the greatest victory in parenting is when your kids come home when it's their choice. So we have, I think I wrote this down, I did somewhere, that we have 936 weeks from birth to graduation. So that's 936 weeks worth of chances to try again and keep trying, because while practice doesn't make us perfect, it makes us better. So we just keep trying, and we run into that even with adult kids. There are days that I'm like, I missed it as a mom of a 23-year-old or a mom of a 20-year-old, but I'm learning, and it's a process, and I get to do that.
And it's never too late to start over. It's never too late. You're like, my kid's 16 years old. I've lost all control. Sit down with them, show them the boundaries, tell them that you love them, tell them that you care, tell them, be humble. Tell them that you missed it. I probably could have been a little more humble when I was raising my kids. So tell them that you want to humble and you want to start over and just start new. Don't worry about what you did wrong. Worry about what you're going to do right.
Yep. So just a reminder, next week we have a really big announcement to make that you are not going to want to miss. Also, if you have any more questions, feel free to continue to put them in the comments and we will answer them. We love responding to you guys, and we love connecting with you guys, because this isn't about big numbers out there. This is about people, and you guys are the reason why we show up on Monday nights, and we're going to keep showing up until God says we're done. So here's to that. And if you have anything specific you want us to address, we love that. We are working on our talks every few weeks, and so just let us know if there's something specific.
That's how we picked parenting tonight. We had enough people say, I need more about parenting. So we were actually going to talk about having fun inside the marriage, but we had enough people comment, ask questions about parenting. So tonight's parenting. If you're in San Marcos, look us up, hit us up, because we're going to dinner after this. So we love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Have a great night.